Hello and welcome back to Section 5, Installation, where we're actually going to look at installing insulation under floors. Now you might be aware that EcoMaster has used and still promotes polyester rolls as being the premier product for retrofit insulation. So you can see the rolls there on the screen. They're a bright green colour, which is a perfect colour for stuff called green stuff. However, in more recent times, green fibres have been in short supply, and so even green stuff is reasonably white. And if you live somewhere other than Victoria, you'll be getting CSR Martini Polymax rolls, and they are snowy white. The important thing is not the colour, but the properties of the material itself, and they are both super products that I would certainly be happy to have in my own home. Now, just before we get on to installation itself, I just want to go through and see how the polyester rolls actually compare with our selection criteria. So the first thing is the lifespan of the product. Well, it comes with a 50-year warranty, and what does that mean? That means that really they don't expect the product to deteriorate at all, ever. I have no doubt that the product is going to outlast the houses that it's put into. Now, the fixing method that we have used and still promote is to staple the product in place. And that's done with galvanized staples. So they are also long-lasting and likely to outlast the home itself. If you happen to live by the seaside, then maybe you want to use stainless steel staples. That's also possible. And therefore, the overall effectiveness of the product is super good. You're going to get an R2.5 product that actually provides R2.5 finished solution. Moisture retention, well, some years ago we made a video where we tried to set fire to the polyester and we sat on it and we poured water through it. The thing about the polyester is that it's super resilient. It always bounces back just to the same shape that it was. And so you can pour water through it if you like. Most of the water goes through, a little bit clings to the fibres, but once it's dried out, it's exactly the same as it was before the water. In terms of fire, it's pretty hard to set fire to, mostly because it melts. Okay, so if, for example, you're in the countryside and you get an ember attack from a bushfire, well, the embers may get stuck in the fibres, but they're likely to just melt the material around them and probably just fall out on the ground. The embers might just fall out on the ground. They're not going to set fire to the material itself. And if there is a big fire, let's just say under the floor or in the floor, the material will actually melt and fall away from the fixings before it burns with the floor. Reduced drafts, absolutely. If it's fitted, as we will see shortly, it's going to reduce drafts through any gaps in the floor. Vermin resistance is super important, I think. Now, when we first started working with this material, we did install it as a test in a little cottage way up high in the Macedon Ranges where there was a history of vermin attack. And so we insulated a part of that floor, and we went back 14 months later to see how it went and what had happened in the meantime. So in the meantime, the rodents had burrowed into the heating system ducting and made a big mess there. So we were keen to see what happened to the underfloor insulation. So underneath, it was absolutely perfect like the day it was installed, but we did take it down to make sure that nothing untoward happened between the insulation and the floor, and there was absolutely nothing. And in the almost 2 decades that we've been using this material, there's been one animal attack, and that was a wombat. Is it a people-safe material? Oh, look. If you're squeezed up under a tight underfloor and you've got material just above your face, what kind of material do you think you'd like to have? I know that this is super people-friendly. It's got long fibres, they're heat melted together, there's no glue, there's no off-gassing, there's no tiny little glass fibres to get in your eyes. It's great material. Eco-friendly, well, it's guaranteed to have at least 40% recycled fibres. Most of the time it's got 80% recycled fibres, so there's only 20% what they call virgin fibres in the product. Joist spacing, is it going to fit different joist spacings? Yes, we'll see how that works. It's a simple method to make it fit any joist spacing whatsoever. So let's have a look now at installation. And let's start with the what the installation goal is. What does it look like? Well, here is an absolutely glorious installation. So if you're careful, you can also have an installation like this. I think you'll agree that it's just a beautiful thing. So the material is fantastic and the installation here is pretty much perfect. You can see the staples there. They're about 120 millimeters apart. And of course the ones on the other side you can't see, but they're the same on the other side of the joists, and on and on and on. And you can see that it's a beautiful complete cover. Yep, so there's another one. Looks pretty similar. Slightly rising floor there. A little bit squeezier up there, but still a pretty easy floor. Anybody could really do that. So if you're careful, yes, you're going to get a result like that. Now, wiring is very important to watch out for. And so you can see by the blue arrows there that we've got a wire running alongside a joist. It's absolutely normal to have this. Some joists have them, some don't. Sometimes there's a pipe, a water pipe, or even a ducted vacuum pipe. Okay, whatever it is running alongside the joist, it's important that we don't try to staple into the joist there. So the way that this works is like this, where there's a wire running along the joist. We don't try to staple into the joist. What we do is we pull the material aside and we staple into the floor like that, up there, all the way along. And that means that the wire or the pipe is always accessible without dislodging the material itself. So if an electrician needs to access this wire, he can. He doesn't need to pull the material down. He just pulls it aside. There's the wire. Just a word of warning here. So working under a floor is tiring stuff. So if you're going to make a mistake, it's more likely to be towards the end of the day. If you put yourself under time pressure, that's usually when you're going to make a mistake. So just bear in mind, better if you don't put yourself under time pressure. Take it a bit easier. Don't get quite so tired. Don't make a mistake. That way you'll keep doing the right thing and not put a staple into a wire. Now, variable joist spacing, we said there's a way to do that. So in this picture, what we see at the front is the regular fitting of the underfloor insulation longitudinally. By the way, it joins over the bearers here, over the stumps. Don't try and pull it through. It's not worth it. It's too hard. Just join it over the stumps, butt them up hard, and you'll get still the perfect result. But what we see here where the arrows are the joins of the turn and tear sections. So the joist spacing here, I don't know why, looks probably like it was a little bit too narrow. And so the method for doing that we call turn and tear. So instead of putting the material longitudinally with the joist, we turn it perpendicularly and we tear a section out and fit it and continue that and butt them up good and hard. And also we like to put a couple of staples in the joins itself, just about 20-30 millimeters of the material into the floor, so that there's never any risk of sagging at the joins. So I think you'll notice that if these arrows weren't there, maybe you wouldn't have even noticed that there was turn and tear in this fitting. Now, if you're thinking of doing this, here's how you start. The first thing to do is to get a tarp. Get a nice big tarp and cut it into long strips and lay it out, strip after strip, to get to the furthest part of your underfloor. What's this for? Well, it's not to keep you clean, although you can crawl on the tarp too, but it's actually to keep the material clean. So one of the things that's not very pleasant is if you drag the material through the dirt and then fit it above you, because all that dirt is going to fall in your eyes. And yes, you can wear goggles, you can wear glasses, safety glasses, all that stuff. But I think you'll find that they fog up pretty badly and you don't want dirt in your eyes. Okay, so this method actually works pretty well, so long as the material stays on the runway. Now, one of the beauties of having roll material is that you can pull in enough material to work over a large floor area. So each roll covers better than 5 square meters of floor, which is pretty good, but you can just lap the rolls over, as you see in the picture. So if you've got someone to help you outside, they can lap the next roll over about the last 2 meters of the previous roll and continue unrolling and feeding in. And that way, if you're underfloor, you can keep pulling in basically an endless supply of underfloor material. So the idea is to scrunch it up as much as you can before you start fitting, so that way you don't have to go back and forwards to get more material. And this method is so far superior to working with bats. Go back, get a few more bats, crawl back, fit them, crawl back. This way you can just pull in really a lot of material and then just get fixing. Well, do you have a really tight underfloor? I don't really know, of course. But you might have. Sometimes there are tight spaces. Okay, so one of the good things about this material, of course, it's very flexible, and you can see it here. This roll is going in there, and it's actually doing a U-turn under the manhole, the internal manhole in this case. So it's a great material for tight spaces. So this is not particularly a very tight floor. It's a bit squeezy, but it's not super tight. But so long as you've got crawl space, commando crawl space, and then able to roll over and fit the material, then that's doable, okay? Certainly our installers have been known to do much tighter spaces than this, but you may not want to. Yeah, but this is certainly still a doable space. Now, we like to use electric staplers. Why is that? Couple of reasons. Okay, firstly, electric staplers are fast. Bang, 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 bang. You can't do that with a hand stapler. The second thing is they are double insulated. Why is that important? Well, if the wrong thing happens and you happen to staple a wire, you want a double insulated tool for that so that you don't get electrocuted, even with a safety switch, okay? Let's hope that your installation has a safety switch. We like to have the power on because if you happen to staple a wire, you want to know exactly the moment that was done. You don't want to know at the end of the day when you turn the power back on and it trips, you go, oh, there might be a staple somewhere under the floor. You want to know exactly the moment that the staple went into the wire and there's no more power, right? Yep. So at the moment, the Azido staplers, they're okay. If you've got, depends on the size of your job. If you've got a slightly larger job, you probably want 2 or 3 to see you through. You don't want to go back to the hardware store to exchange it for a working one every 5 minutes. So yeah, get yourself 2 or 3, depending on the size of your job, and that'll be a happier experience. Okay. Now that's fitting from underneath, which is all the retrofit stuff. But you can also fit this polyester roll material from the top. So if you've got a Renault or if you've got a new build, yep, you can do this. Especially for a new build, actually, because if it rains, if you put this out and it rains, well, it's just got to dry out before you put the floor on. You know, it's not going to damage the material itself. But anyway, this is a Renault, and you can see here that it's just fitted exactly the same way. It just happens to be from the top rather than from the bottom. And here is a whole room where the fitting method has been turn and tear. So you can see that they're all sections. Everywhere there are sections. Of course, you don't get a chance to staple up the middle of the join into the floor because there is none. So it's extra important that they are pushed up tightly to each other, which they have been here, and there's no gaps anywhere in this installation. So that's a way to do it. Again, where the floor joist width is not appropriate for longitudinal fitting. Now you might have this. Sometimes there are steel frame floors. So you can see that here there's a chipboard floor, structural chipboard, sitting on top of steel framing. In this case there's C-sections, but sometimes they're box sections. Now you could fit polyester insulation between here and pull it aside and staple it into the floor. That's been done, but we don't like this because it's not fully effective. And why is that? Well, because steel is a highly conductive material, thermally conductive, and there's a lot of steel here. So even with insulation between the joists, you're still going to lose an enormous amount of energy out of that floor through the steel joists. So we haven't been fans of doing underfloor, steel frame underfloors, and we've been working for some years to figure out a way of achieving a fully effective installation on the steel frame underfloors. Now, I'm very happy to announce that we have in fact achieved that, and that's what you can see here. These white things are what we call joisties, and they fit under the steel framing, and they also hold up the material firmly against the floor. So now we've achieved an effective insulation for steel framed underfloors. Here's another one. Again, you can see the joisties. This one was in fact a box section rather than a C-section. Doesn't really matter. The joisties just fit up under the steel, and you can see that they're holding the insulation, the polyester rolls, firmly against the floor. In fact, once you've got the joisties up, it's just a breeze to put the insulation in. There's no stapling. So it's a really great method to get a super job done under your steel frame floor. So I hope that that's been helpful. In the next section we're going to cover what things to look out for under a floor, and after that, what actually can you do with leftover material. So I'll see you again in the next section.